Hi, I'm Stargate Pioneer from Better Podcasting, a proud member of the Gonna Geek Network, just like the show you're listening to now. The opinions expressed are those of each individual host. Check out all the other podcasts at GonnaGeekNetwork.com and get ready because geekiness begins in 3, 2, 1.
You are listening to the Starling Tribune, a podcast dedicated to the Arrow TV show.
This guy gets more airtime than the Kardashians, right?
This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, situations, and stories are the properties of Time Warner. I am the Oracle, and this is your Tribune.
Welcome back to Earth 2's favorite newspaper, the Starling Tribune, sponsored by Star Labs and CEO Jesse Quick. I am the chief editor, Stargate Pioneer. My friends call me SP, and your other reporters for this special episode number 179 of the Starling Tribune are Chris.
Crab legs. They're delicious.
It's scrumptious, and the open bar doesn't hurt either. And Michelle.
Do you just make up scientific words to make yourself sound smarter?
Yes, I actually do that.
Figures.
Yeah, exactly. All of us smart people do that. This podcast is recorded on Sunday, December 3rd, 2017, live via geeks.live. Remember, folks, our audio newspaper is full of spoilers, facts, and speculations about Arrow and the rest of the DC TV, movie, and comic universes.
So tonight we'll be discussing the epic crossover, the 4-part crossover, Crisis on Earth X, so that just means spoilers abound.
If you're new to the show, thank you for searching us out on the internet and joining us. After the show, you can check out our content at GonnaGeek.com, where you can also find other geeky videos, podcasts, and articles.
Thanks, guys. Michelle, it's time to just dive right in and break down the event for us.
Sure. So unlike last year, this event actually was just a 4-hour mini-series movie called Crisis on Earth X. In fact, you didn't even see any of the opening credits for each individual show. They all opened with that same Crisis on Earth X. So really, there's just part 1, 2, 3, and 4. They aired Monday and Tuesday, November 27th and 28th, 2017. 4 directors. Part 1 was directed by Larry Ting. Part 2, James Banford, a favorite of ours. Part 3, Dermot Downs. And Part 4, Gregory Smith. Writers. The story for Crisis on Earth X is Mark Guggenheim and Andrew Kreisberg. Part 1 was, the teleplay was written by Robert Rovner and Jessica Queller. Part 2 teleplay was written by Wendy Miracle and Ben Skolowaski. Part 3 teleplay was written by Todd Helbing. And the Part 4 teleplay was written by Phil Klemmer and Kato Shimizu.
All heavy hitters across the board. Now, we're going to get really quick into the weekly ratings. I'm not going to say what show it was because it's basically Part 1 through Part 4. So Part 1, a live rating of 2.65. Part 2, a live rating of 2.54. Part 3, a live rating of 2.82. And Part 4, a live rating of 2.80, which are all higher ratings for this season for all 4 shows. Michelle, Crisis on Earth X, what is that all about?
Well, this event really has a straightforward plot. We have Earth X, Nazis won the war, the world is awful, it's, evil, evil, evil. Well, the Nazis from there invade, they want to take over, and the people on Earth X are fighting for change, for freedom, for love. And, the bad guys not only want to conquer our Earth, they want Kara's heart and all that type of stuff. So that's basically the plot of our epic event. What was interesting is how we basically had pairs of characters go through these little arcs throughout the whole event. And I would like to start with a pair who I think are the worst wedding guest ever. Mm-hmm. And I know this couple is a favorite of SP. I know he just loves them to death. So, SP, why don't you get us started with the one, the onlys, Oliver Queen and Felicity Smoke?
I'll admit, at one point in time, I was a Felicity Smoke fan. She's gotten better this year, but she's got to earn my trust back, and she just hasn't done that yet. So let's begin by saying the obvious. Oliver is still breaking his promise to William by bringing the Green Arrow. And if you're not watching Arrow, if you're watching Supergirl, Flash, or Legends of Tomorrow, and you're not watching Green Arrow, you have no idea that this storyline is going on. Now, you do have Oliver asking Felicity to marry him again at the rehearsal dinner, or at least like, are you open to the possibility? It wasn't a straight out proposal. It was like, hey, should we be thinking about this right now? Felicity, for her part, she says no. She likes their life and she doesn't want to change things. By the way, the last time they went through this, a lot of bad things happened to them. So she didn't want that to happen again as well. If you go further on into the miniseries, Oliver tries to reason with Prometheus, who turns out to be Tommy Merlin, which was an awesome Easter egg, by the way. We've always wanted Tommy back. He has been killed since season 1, and we've gotten him a few times in flashbacks, but it was great to see him back, even as an evil Nazi. It was just great to see the actor on screen again, and he played the evil Nazi really well, really good as well. Now, Oliver, believe it or not, is the Fuhrer. He is the leader of the encamped world on Earth X, which is totally believable, by the way, because he is League of Assassins trained and was the purported leader at one point in time to the League of Assassins. So yeah, I can definitely see him as the Fuhrer, and he played it well, especially with all his brooding. Now, Felicity, for her part, she had to stand up to the Dark Archer, which is what they called him, the Dark Archer. And the Dark Archer, he's married to Overgirl. Yeah, that is Supergirl over on the Nazi Earth X. Felicity feels guilty for turning Oliver down before he gets captured in the third part, and it changes circumstances, and then she asks Ollie to marry her at the end after the nuptials were exchanged, or the vows were exchanged between Barry and Iris at the end. But hey, there's no prenup. There's no William, no guests, just Barry and Iris and Diggle. So basically, worst wedding guests ever.
Yeah, that's the best way to put it there, is they're terrible. Terrible wedding guests. And especially with the scene that gets made during the reception, she like yells, "No, I don't want to marry you," and everyone's like, and turns over.
That's like the happiest scene in the entire 4-part series, by the way, is the rehearsal dinner, and they ruin it.
I know Joe gives that wonderful speech, minus that part where he reminds everybody that he raised Iris and Barry,
brother and sister,
the whole
basically.
incest thing that, oh God, it still gets to me. But it was beautiful. And here you have, they end the event with Barry and Iris getting married, and they exchange these beautiful vows, and then Felicity just interrupts them. And my mom watched this and she just went, they are the worst people ever, and I no longer like them. She really is very upset with Felicity and Oliver.
Yeah, this is the crutch they inevitably fall back to all the time on things. And I know I have my issues with the illicity and all of that because it seems forced, but it's really forced here. This is not a story about Oliver and Felicity, yet they keep shoehorning them in and taking away from other things. And I'm sitting here, I'm like, this is about Barry and Iris. We've been building up to this for weeks in Flash, for seasons in Flash. Let it breathe on its own. Don't feel like you've got to shove the holisty into it because somebody had a good idea last year to do a weird double wedding at the end of a crossover. No, let it breathe on its own. Don't force it. And it just felt so forced to me. And maybe it's because I'm sensitive to it, because holisty annoys me more often than not anymore.
I've got another minor thing that I'm going to have to talk about here. It's the fact that if you are only watching The Flash, or if you are only watching Arrow, and you are watching these via DVR, like some Americans still are, and your DVR is set to record just that show, you're not going to see these weddings. So if you're an Arrow or a Flash person and you've only watched that one episode, you're going to come back next week and go, what? They got married?
Yeah, it'll be previously on Arrow or whatever. There'll be the marriage scene.
I know, because this starts with Barry Allen and Iris West finally getting married. It's been teased since season 1 of The Flash. And if you watched last week's Flash, you heard multiple times about how they were going to get married in a week. And this is finally the time. And, again, that beautiful rehearsal dinner. And then we get the wedding going. And Chris, how does the wedding proceed?
Yeah, that does. Well, it starts out all right, actually. We get a great, sweet moment where Barry talks to Kara the night before, and he's got her singing his song from the musical crossover, Running Home to You, as Iris is coming down the aisle. And you get some great acting from Grant Gustin as he looks up, and there's tears in his eyes as he sees his new bride coming down the aisle. And then, because we can't have good things in the Flaro universe, that's when the Nazis come in and disrupt everything. And everyone but Mick is kind of disappointed with that, I think. Mick, on the other hand, thinks that's the best thing ever. He gets to punch some Nazis.
Best wedding ever.
I mean, I have to admit, I like the timing of, if anybody objects. And it's not just like they march in and they announce, like with a scream. All of a sudden, you see the minister who doesn't know them, which I find really weird. Like, why would you get a minister who doesn't even know you to officiate your wedding? I thought that was kind of odd.
Because they don't know any minister.
Because they're disposable. Well, yeah, they do. We find out at the end. We find someone who's ordained. But the minister was disposable, so you could have someone that actually dies because of the Nazis. There had to be repercussions.
Minister wasn't disposable. It's William Caddy, played the greatest American hero. What a great cameo.
I reiterate, the minister's disposable.
And he just gets obliterated by Overgirl, I-beams.
And we learn later that Overgirl was actually watching the wedding. So she chose this point to go ahead and intervene. She made it theatrical.
Well, because she needs Kara's heart, choosing this particular time is logical because this Earth doesn't have a Superman. So maybe in this Earth, Krypton survived, and that's why we don't have our own Supergirl and Superman on this Earth. That's the only thing I'm thinking of, because Wells does point out that there's 53 Earths, and so there's 53 Kryptons and 53 Karas, and so on and so forth.
And that he's fought Superman before. We get to that later, too. And you're like, oh.
Michelle, that's
I know.
Great catch, because I was actually referring to the time during the ceremony, but you're absolutely right. Kara's normally not on Earth, so they had to wait for her to come to Earth 1 for whatever reason, from Earth 39 or 38 or wherever Earth she's from.
Yeah, because without Superman, it's easier for them to... I mean, when you look at it, you've got their version of Oliver and their version of Flash, and then only one Kryptonian. If they went to Kara's, there'd be 2 Kryptonians. And I would do the same. I would wait till they're all at the wedding, because 1 Kryptonian's bad enough. 2, they wouldn't have stood a chance.
So I really wish they kind of dropped Superman in the Earth X timeline, because there's this great, there's a great comic story, miniseries, Superman Red Sun, that presumes instead of Clark Kent Kal-El landing in Smallville, Kansas, he lands in the USSR, and he's raised as like a son of the state. So he's a red sun, basically. And it's a great little story. It'd been an awesome call out if they could have even had been like, well, we did have our Superman and he got killed or something like that, to kind of tie into that story, because it would have made some sense. It'd been fun. I don't know. Maybe I'm just overly wishful thinking. I mean, we can't have Superman in this. That'd be way too many people. They had enough problems balancing some of the characters, much to some characters' detriments, which I'll touch on later.
I did like, of course, the Glee reference with Kara singing the processional song. I thought that was very well done. Actually, it was a good song for that purpose, and she has a great voice. So I did a lot of people are like, oh, I can't believe you just use this as an excuse for her to sing. No, actually, if I was having a wedding, I would want her to sing at my wedding.
Well, I mean, it seemed organic to me too, because remember, one of the things that helped Barry decide he wants to marry Iris was the musical episode. He proposes to her at the end of that with the song she sings. It's organic and it makes sense. And she and Kara had that experience with Barry of that musical moment. So I have no problem with it. That made sense to me. Yes, it's slightly cheesy, but who cares? It's fun. This is a superhero crossover. There's going to be moments of cheese.
I think the whole thing was cheese.
Yeah, so what's interesting is that while this starts with Barry and Iris, the invasion separates them and then reunites them at the end so they can get married and then have the worst wedding guest ever. Because not only do, Oliver and Felicity make that about them, poor Barry and Iris have like the worst friends. No one RSVPs until like the day before, which is a serious faux pas.
Oh, yeah.
You need to RSVP at least 2 weeks before the date because there's a whole bunch of moving parts to a wedding. It's not just sitting on the bride and the groom. There's food and catering and rehearsal dinners. And I've never been married, but I know people who've been married and how they complain about these things.
Yeah. Also, you have to take a look at why so many of them were invited to the wedding. It's that because they are trying to live secretive lives. They have secret identities, and therefore they don't really go out and make friends all that much. And the friends that they make are friends that are other superheroes that they teamed up with before. So that's why the wedding is filled in the Galleria with other superheroes, really, because that's all they know at this point.
Exactly. I had a pause there at the very beginning when they had all the guests that were in there. I paused and went, well, where's Ray? Until I guess they dropped later that the Wave Rider was in the prehistoric era or whatever. So I was like, is he in charge of the Wave Rider right now? And that's why he didn't get to come to the wedding? Because remember, Ray's been on the Flash before. He's worked with Team Flash. He's been to Star Labs. So I was sitting there, I was going, shouldn't he get to come to the wedding? Did they not invite Ray? This sucks.
They didn't invite Ray because they didn't have enough money for the special effects for the suit.
Well, that very well could be it.
Yes. So what's interesting is that Iris works a lot with Felicity during the event. And I thought this team up was pretty interesting because they're just not girlfriend mode. They actually come together and they're very active in they're trying to beat up Nazis. They're trying to save Kara. And it worked better than I thought it would, which is interesting.
I think all the pair-ups, there were several one-on-ones that occurred throughout the 4-part miniseries event, whatever you want to call it. And I think they were done well. I don't care what part you're talking about. Now, obviously, part 1 was actually done by the Supergirl crew. Part 2 was done by the Arrow crew. Part 3 was done by the Flash crew. And part 4 was done by the Legends of Tomorrow crew. Yeah, the creative team behind was consolidated, but it was 4 separate episodes that were filmed. I can't imagine the filming schedule for this, by the way. It must have been horrendous because they're trying to do these episodes in 8 days. They must have allotted for additional time because you have actors that are running from set to set at that point in time, even though they're all in one area. I don't think they could have done that. So
from what I recall, Stephen Amell indicated that this took more time than the other crossovers before because there were so many people that were across all 4 episodes and things like that. So I don't know the exact numbers. We could probably find the interviews he's done on it, but I wager they took a good deal more time to put this together. He said it was almost like a movie production.
Right. So you would have to have pushed back your beginning production a few weeks before you actually started. It might have been one of the reasons why they started so late and why Arrow had to run on Thanksgiving was specifically for the filming time for this. But anyway, if you're talking about Iris and Felicity getting together, you have to talk about all the rest of them and the fact that they were having these one-on-one storylines. I mean, we already talked about 2. They were the obvious ones that got married, Oliver and Felicity and Barry and Iris. But you have this great conversation going between Iris and Felicity. You have 2 people that at the end of the story became wives of superheroes. They're in a very exclusive club now, and it would make sense that they would be besties to move forward with their lives.
Chris, what did you think of their performance as a team, Iris and Felicity?
They did okay. They did what they needed to. They almost got Kara out, which was nice, but we all knew that wasn't going to happen. And how they didn't with Metallo showing up to basically blast them away was pretty cool. I mean, their real success as a team was getting the Legends in. Being able to signal out to the Legends since they couldn't break into the cells to get Cisco and Team Arrow out. So they were successful in that regard. They got to have a diehard moment crawling around in the giant air ducts at Star Labs. Like, giant air ducts.
Well, you're talking industrial stuff for a big facility. That would have to be large air ducts. And as far as their McLean moment, that was really cool. But it actually took me out a little bit when they were fighting the Nazis as they were trying to send the SOS out, because I forget who it was. I think it was Iris. She leans over to the side, to the wall, to grab the steam pipe or whatever. And I'm like, if I was a Nazi, she'd be dead right now. There's no reason that she could have done that much movement without getting shot or a shot being fired or something. So that took me out a little bit.
Maybe they were told to keep them alive for some reason, to use as bartering chips to keep Kara in line if she got out of control.
Kara's always out of control.
Well,
super
fair.
Yeah. Why don't we go ahead? I want to move on to really the duo that had the biggest story arc, the most emotional story arc, and that would be Martin Stein and Jefferson Jackson. If you haven't been watching Legends, Firestorm basically needs to break up. In real life, Victor Garber, who plays Martin Stein, has left the show and he's actually on Broadway right now. So they needed a way to write him out. So in Legends, they needed to figure out a way to have Jefferson live his own life and Martin live his own life, because otherwise they wouldn't be able to function, because Firestorm needs to meet up ever so often in order to join. And so bad stuff doesn't happen. And when we start, fortunately, Cisco and Wells has miraculously perfected the cure for Firestorm. The catch is neither one of them will have powers anymore after it's taken. And and then they start on, because they start on this journey of, Martin thinks everything's fine and Jackson doesn't. So, Chris, why don't you take us a little bit more through, because I'm about ready to cry.
This whole thing, this part made me tear up. I see people in the chat room saying the same thing, but they finally have at it, and Martin's trying to figure out why Jax is so upset, and it comes out that Jax is like, I think of you, I've never had a father really. You're like a father to me. And Martin, the pieces come together and, well, of course you're like a son to me. And you kind of have this bonding moment and you're like, oh man, this is awesome. These two characters, they're kind of figuring out what they truly mean to each other. Despite the fact they have a psychic connection, sometimes words portray things better. And it's powerful. And you sit there and you go, these two guys, I'm sad to see them split apart, but we all know something's going to happen. We all know that Victor Garber's going off the show, but this is a great send-off if you can have these two acknowledge what they mean to each other so that they can split Firestorm, go their separate ways, and maybe cross paths again in the future. And the fact that that's not how it worked out, it just absolutely gutted me. So when everyone is trapped on Earth X, you've got Jefferson and Martin who are there as Firestorm, but in order to get the portal open, they separate. And Martin goes to hit a switch, and he gets shot in the back. And you just see me as that happens and go, oh no. And he falls on the ground. And then he crawls and tries to move forward to hit the switch because Jefferson can't get out. He wants to save everyone. He gets shot again. So he's got 2 rounds in his back. He's bleeding out. He's injured. It doesn't look good for him. And then they combine Firestorm, and that gives me hope. And I go, oh, maybe they're going to find a way to do it. Gideon can work wonders so long as they get him to the Wave Rider. Gideon can figure something out. And Gideon can't. And you find out that for all intents and purposes, Martin's basically dead already. It's just the connection with Jax that's keeping him alive. And you get a great scene between Martin and Jax. And it hurt me to watch. As I'm watching it, my eyes were watering, and they're starting to do it now. And the actors just nailed it. You see it's two people that really care about each other, and one has to let the other go. He knows his time is up. And father and son moments like that in movies, TV, books, things like that, they always get me. And I kid you not, there were tears rolling down my cheeks as I was watching that. And I'm here like rubbing my eyes. And when it goes to commercial after he passes away, I just kind of paused. And I went, "You sons of expletives, you guys made me cry at a superhero TV show." I'm not ashamed that I did, but I was like, I didn't expect to cry in the middle of a superhero TV show with this epic 4-part crossover, punching Nazis, and they had me crying.
We always knew that Victor Garber was leaving the show, Michelle, as you said before. I had thought that they were going to find a way for him to leave, that he could conceivably come back and do guest appearances from time to time. And let's face it, that still could happen because it's happened with characters that have passed on already. But I was not expecting them to outright kill him off, especially without having the ability to spend some time with his family, Clarissa and Lily and Ronnie. It really hurt me that they were not able to get Victor back. But then I started thinking about it. He's basically on the front lines. You know, you can think of this as a special forces unit. You can think of this as a ongoing war, which it really is. It's time war. And this happens when you're away on those missions. Now, he wanted to retire, and he was making plans for that. And every moviegoer that's been to a war movie knows that the person's just not going to make it through. So I had to temper myself with all that knowledge going into it, because I was about to get really mad. And I was like, yeah, okay, well, this was at least well done. They had a nice funeral scene. Jax was taken out of the rest of it because he was helping Clarissa and Lily through it. So you see he's not in either of the huge team shots that happen later. One on the stairs in the Wave Rider when they're Skyping the other Wave Rider, and then one when they're all walking out to do the final battle. Firestorm or Jax is not present. And that was noticeable to me. At first you're like, oh wow, this is cool, everybody's there, but not everybody is. And it's hurtful. The whole thing was very sad. Very sad.
I think I get why Jax isn't there, because he's just suffered a trauma, and you know, his partner has Firestorm dying. He's been depowered, and he doesn't have any powers with minimal training. You probably don't want to bring him into an all-out brawl with a bunch of superpowered, in some cases, Nazis. And leaving him with Martin's family to help them feel better about things is probably the better choice for things. But man, this was like a gut punch at some points, because as soon as I'm feeling a little bit better after Martin's died, they go to the funeral, and I'm like, oh, damn it. Here's Jax giving a speech about what Martin meant to him, channeling things that Martin would say. And I was like, oh, another gut punch here, guys. Way to go. I mean,
well written.
Well, I mean,
gave
me the feels. Amazing. And then the problem was we went right from that to the wedding stuff we talked about at the top of the show. And I was like, oh, you ruined it.
Yeah, I was thinking, why are they in the middle of the park? And it's because they're just coming straight from the funeral and they're saying goodbye to everybody. That's what happened. I was like, oh man, that's why it happened in the middle of a park.
Yeah, I thought it was cute that Martin thought Jax's problem was that he wouldn't have any powers, because the whole deal was for Martin and Jax to find a way for Jax to remain, you know, a legend. And Martin thinks, hey, let me give him powers. And so during the rehearsal dinner, he brings out this vial. And he's like, look, I can give you powers. And Jackson's like, what? And he's like, this is the essence of some sort of spider. And he's like, you're going to make me Spider-Man? And he's like, no, I'm going to give you sticky powers. And Jackson's like, you're going to make me the spectacular sticky man? Like, Gray, really? Come on.
I could just imagine this going wrong too. Like, he pushes his hand on something, like he's fixing the ship, and all of a sudden he can't move. He's like frozen to the ship. I can see this happening because he's still the engineer of the Wave Rider.
They actually did name drop Spider-Man, which was kind of fun too.
Yeah. like I said, my mom watched this, and we actually talked a little bit about it, and she too was, emotional and really sad that Stein died. But one of the things that kind of, I don't know if it was the director or the way it was written, but during the sequence when they have to manually get the portal to Earth 1 working again, there's a bunch of Nazis firing, but there's Ollie and then there's Snart. There doesn't seem to be any sort of them trying to do any cover fire as well. Like,
no strategy
is it
to their
just
assault.
yeah, like, is it just me, or does it just seem like, I understand Jack's not being able to do anything. He really was pinned down and he really was vulnerable. But Snart and Ollie were kind of sheltered, and I don't know. They're like, they actually have abilities and such.
Well, look, this is not Team Arrow. They don't even know Delta formation together. I mean, who's going to take lead? Who's going to take? They don't know. It's a team up.
Fair.
They
were just reacting at this point in time. There was a time limit on things. They had to be out of there in a certain amount of time. They're out of place. So honestly, I think they just went with the worst plan possible, which is storm the gates, and we'll make it up as we go. And you could argue that lack of planning is potentially what cost Martin his life, is the fact that they didn't come up with a strategy for things to do. And while I sort of understand why they split Firestorm there, you're going to take one of your most powerful pieces on the board and split them into two. I don't like the strategy there, but I sort of understand why they had to do it, because there's also a budgetary reason too.
Yeah.
So let's set this up. So our heroes have been taken to Earth X, and they're finally rescued. And there's this whole scene with General Wynn and Snart, who is, Leo, who's basically Citizen Cold. You're introduced to the Ray and basically the resistance movement. And General Shot basically just wants to blow the facility up with the portal. And they're like, no, can we try to go home first? And their big plan is for Ollie to pretend to be the Fuhrer and try to be all bad. And there's a truck, and Snart and Ollie are basically going to go through the front door, with the others, it's going to be sneaking in somehow, with Barry and the Ray fighting the Red Tornado, which is the resistance weapon that they're going to use to blow the portal to smithereens. And of course, Ollie messes up the plan because he, instead of shooting the Earth X Felicity, he tries to kill Earth X Quentin, who was really scary as a Nazi. That was really odd to see. So it's interesting that you have your big power players away. And yeah, was it a great plan? Like, was this inevitable that somebody had to die during this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. You're talking about massive amounts of evil with superpowers of their own versus these superheroes on their own. Eventually, I think somebody was bound to fall.
If everyone survived this, there's no stakes to it. I mean, it's the crossover. It's the biggest thing. You've got superpowered versus superpowered and all of these things. It's the same thing people criticize in some comic stories and in some movies even, is if everyone's going to come out the other side okay, you lose a little bit of the tension. By killing someone, as regrettable as it might be in some cases, it shows that there's costs, there's stakes to it. So it made sense to me, and sadly it was Martin that paid the price. And I think what bummed me most on that one is they kept talking about, we have a great way to send him out, it's going to be respectful, blah blah blah, in all the interviews. And I was like, but you killed him. And it made me sad. But it was a powerful scene.
He heroically died to not only save his team but his planet and his Earth and all the Earths, really. And yeah, the thing about no consequences, to backtrack a little bit, the whole thing over Barry letting Thong go at the end, that really bugged me. It's like, why? Because he's going to come back. He's going to do something to you or your family or somebody you care about. and it's going to end up bad. So why are you letting him go? So that's a little bit of no consequences, just setting it up to happen again and again and again. Now, granted, he did kill Thawne, or Thawne died against him a couple of times. So I guess maybe it's inevitable that they see each other again and again and again.
So I think that was part of it. And I think Barry also looked at the fact of this is going to happen again, regardless of what I do, because Thawne's died, 3-4 times at this point in time, and somehow come back because of various time travel issues. So I think in Barry's mind, it could have been, look, there's nothing I can do to change any of this right now, and the rest of the team's going to need my help. Let's just stop screwing around with Thawne. Let's go and help everyone else. Which would have been great if you had more than one speedster and not send the other speedster off to do nothing for 3 parts of the crossover. Oh, wait.
A little sore on that one?
A little sore on that one.
Okay, we'll get to that later. Michelle, what are we talking about next?
Well, this is really the heart of the board. So one of the things I wanted to touch on is how did we feel after, Stein dies and then there's the big fight and they make it almost like for Stein, they actually say for the professor.
Yep, they did. And I don't know if it got them to fight any better or anything, but it was something for all of them to rally around.
Exactly. It was your nice TV moment too.
Yes. All right. So sad stuff over. Let's go to something really funny. And that is Sarah and Alex. Alex Danvers is Kara's sister on Supergirl. Alex and Maggie were engaged. Alex broke it off because she wants kids and Maggie doesn't. And so here we are, rehearsal dinner. Sarah just loves drinking scotch. Alex is trying to get over Maggie. And SP, what happens?
Yeah, the two of them hook up just because, well, it's something you do at weddings, apparently. And I think this was good. And this was healing, actually, for both of them, even though it was a little less so for Sarah than Alex. But Alex was still not over Maggie and was going to continue dragging her down. At the beginning of the show, oh my gosh, the beginning of the show was so cool. We haven't talked about that yet, where the beginning of the show was one of the most fantastic lead-ins to a crossover because it was just fun. It was active. You had people fighting each other and you saw all the characters laid out to you in 3 or 4 minutes, which was cool because some of them you didn't see again until the very end. But it was a great way to come in. One of the things that happened when they were going in was the fact that Alex was sulking, as was her sister Kara, on the couch, and they were watching some kind of movie. I didn't even see what was on TV. It was some rom-com or something like that. And she was just getting drunk. So okay, let's have some fun. Let's go to a wedding. Okay, let's do that. So this got Maggie out of that spiral that she was in. And it allowed her to see what she was and what she wasn't. And a one night stand is just not Alex, even though I think if she sees Sarah again, they're not in a relationship. I think they could possibly go through this again, but I think the door is kind of closed on that as the series goes through its parts in the event. And it was really cool because they were paired up I was talking about the pairings earlier. These two were paired up throughout the parts. They would fight together, and they're both either military or assassin trained. So they're going at it with a real deliberacy that is true partners. And it was so cool to see them out here. It was really well paired up. And I have to give kudos to the creators, the creative team behind this, because these two were just a natural pair, even without the romantic stuff out of it.
Yeah, they were fun together.
Look, I think a lot of us, I'm going to admit, many people have one night stands. I've had them. Alex, welcome to the club. There's pie.
Is there punch too? I like punch and pie.
Of course. Punch and pie. Sometimes your heart's a little broken. You just need rebound sex. And in order to move on to something better, it was interesting. Sarah mentioned that she had a Maggie that must be Nissa. I'm thinking.
I can see that. Because remember, Nissa did not like the fact that she was resurrected and pretty much was saying she's not the same Sarah after that.
No, by the way, Nissa's still married to Oliver. We'll touch on that later.
Yeah.
but I loved it. They were in the church. They ripped their dresses, up to give themselves some leg room. They took on Nazis. They captured Prometheus. They're the ones that did that.
Matter of fact, Alex stole one of Prometheus' sword from him during the fight, if you watch close enough.
Which was cool.
And the way she used the incense thing, I'm not Catholic.
It's just a chain with a burning incense thing at the end of it. She was using the chain as the weapon, really. Yeah.
That was cool.
Sarah. Yep.
Yeah. I loved it when they were on Earth X, and again, Nazi Quentin comes in and he sees Sarah and he's just like, oh my gosh, you're perfection. And she just went, you know what? I like men and I like women. And he mentions I had a daughter like that and I got rid of her. And it's like, oh my goodness, Sarah is bi in every Earth. I love this.
Hard to go wrong there.
I know. I just absolutely loved it. And again, it was really fun to see those two hook up and kick some butt.
And they did a lot. Matter of fact, Alex had point blank shots at many, many Nazis. You see her just taking them out, killing them left, right, and backwards. There was a lot of Nazis that died that didn't have any blood. So I'm wondering if the Nazis have their blood taken from their bodies over on Earth X before they become stormtroopers. I don't know.
Who knows? Although I will say, in all the fights we had here with Sarah, I missed the old costume with the flowing coat. That would have been awesome in the fight scenes, because that coat flailing around is awesome looking to me. I don't know. I'm weird.
It does look cool, especially when she does some of those roundhouse kicks and everything like that. Another lovely couple that was surprising to me, and that is Snart and the Ray. We meet the Ray in the concentration camp on Earth X. The team is marched out. They're lined up. They're going to get executed. And then all of a sudden, Leo comes in and saves the day. And later, we learn they're a couple. That surprised me. What about you guys?
Yeah, I wasn't expecting it, but I liked it. I like the fact that we have a good guy Snart that is relatively charming, too. I mean, other Snart was charming, but he was kind of sarcastic and almost an a-hole about it. This Snart's just charming across the board. You kind of like him every time he comes on screen, and it's just Wentworth Miller's having fun chewing that scenery.
He was a little bit annoying when he was after Mick a couple of times. He was so lawful good that even being around Mick was like, it's driving me nuts. Haven't you ever heard of due process? It's like, no, I haven't. Of course he has. He just doesn't care about it.
There's not much Mick cares about aside from beer, though, let's be honest.
Well, he cared about Killer Frost.
Did you bring beers, pretty?
Yeah. How about an army? Oh, you got legends. You don't need an army. No, I actually would prefer an army.
Yeah. Well, we've got a whole... Oh, wrong series. Sorry.
Yes, this Snart is sentimental, but he and the Ray are instrumental in convincing, General Schott to give them the opportunity to send our heroes back home. And I loved it when Barry was like mimicking him, and he's like, oh, go in, have a plan, don't have a plan, take the plan, throw it away. And then Leo's like, wait a minute, I always have a plan, down to the second, we need a plan. That was kind of funny.
It was total opposite, especially after Barry had mimicked him right before that. It was great because it was showing you that this is not the same person this was not Snart. This is Leo. And Now we have Leo for a little bit. I don't know for how long, but it's going to be fun. And oh, by the way, guys, why did Leo decide to stay at Earth 1 at the end? Because that confused me. There's a lot to do over on Earth X. That's where he's from. Why doesn't he go back there?
Maybe he wants to understand Ray's world a little bit, too. I mean, that could be part of it is what I was thinking. Or maybe he's got... Rory is what they're saying in the chat room as a possible solution. That was the other thing I was going to throw out there is maybe he and Rory were close in the other universe and he wants to try and set him on a better path here. I don't know. Regardless, I'm just happy to see Wentworth Miller around for a little while longer because he was misleading. The headlines made it seem like once he did the crossover, he was done. It seems like he did at least an episode of Legends afterwards.
Yeah, I think he stayed for Mick because he's lost his Mick. His Mick actually died heroically. And Mick is like, wait, I died saving pigs? Gosh, I don't like this. So when it comes to Earth X, we basically had a triad of evil. We had the Dark Archer, we had Overgirl, and then we had Thawne, who ends up being our Thawne, not Earth X Thawne, because time travel and the Speed Force. And what's interesting is that we kind of had that evil team trope of infighting because we have two sort of goals. And Chris, what did you think about our triad of evil?
So it seemed I didn't like it at first, but then I did like it as it grew to have it be Eobard Thawne yet again, and not necessarily the Earth X Eobard, but the same one that Barry had tangled with. But then I went, you know what? It does make sense because Eobard is like a bad penny. He's always going to turn up. That is his one distinguishing trait in all this. He's always going to show up to ruin Barry's life. So I could see him be like, well, here's another way to screw with Barry is I'm going to ally with Overgirl and the Fuhrer, whatever title he was going with, I forget. So I kind of enjoyed his dynamic in there. I enjoyed him needling Kara about the fact that, hey, your husband needs to realize he needs to do everything for, not just for you. He's the Fuhrer. He's got to keep an eye on everything. And she's like, he'll do the right thing. Don't worry. It was enjoyable. And that being said, I just enjoyed Evil Kara and Evil Ollie. Mostly Evil Kara because it was very different than what we normally see. And I went, huh, I like it.
She was impressive on screen. I watched this twice all the way through. I watched it once in literally a cinematic setting, lights out, just watching it on my main TV. And then I took notes. The second time through, I was noticing specifically her playing Overgirl. And in part 3 and part 4, she's just downright evil. I mean, that girl can play evil. And it wasn't just forced. It wasn't like when she's bad from time to time because other circumstances over on Supergirl. This was her at the heart of evil, and she did well at it. So kudos to you, Melissa.
Yes. And one last thing I forgot to mention on Professor Zoom or Reverse Flash. I love the fact that he put on Wells' face just to screw with Barry because Tom Cavanaugh as the Reverse Flash in season 1 is still delightful to me. I love the fact that he showed up in the wheelchair for a couple minutes and then got out of the wheelchair and just brought back all that nostalgia. It was great to see, as much as I've also enjoyed Matt Lesher in the role as we saw him grow into it through the end of Flash and Legends. I really did enjoy seeing Tom Cavanaugh get to be Evil Wells again, and that was fun. I feel a little bad for Matt Lesher that he didn't get to be in the crossover, but hey, Tom Cavanaugh got to be evil. There's not much better than that.
Yeah, I built this place. It was my home for 15 years. So, you're not going to lock him in a room. He's going to be able to get out, and he knew exactly where the hiding places were and everything. He knew the ins and outs of everything. So
vibrate through all the walls too.
Yeah. So he's got it going on as the, what do we want to call him here? The Reverse Flash?
Reverse Flash is technically what he is. I slip up and call him Professor Zoom sometimes due to my comic background.
Okay. And by the way, I'm sorry. It wasn't the trio. It was the quartet because Tommy was part of their gang, but he just died.
It's just like the show. He only made it through the first piece of it.
What's interesting is Stephen Amell actually talked about this on either Facebook or Twitter. The guy who plays Tommy Merlin, he's working on another show called Chicago Med. The actor actually finished his day, that job, got on a plane, came in for a day, did that scene, hopped on a plane that night, and went back to work. That was awesome.
Yeah, it was cool. It was great payoff for people who've been watching from the beginning. However, if you're someone who's jumped onto the CW superhero shows later on, you're like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah, they had to spell it out. He was my best friend.
Exactly. Yeah. And they did pretty much explicitly spell it out. And it led to a pretty awesome scene where Earth X Tommy's just playing with Oliver.
I have a little bit of a problem with that because they would have to have been on Earth 1 for quite some time to gain all that knowledge about elementary schools and whatever. Because you're coming from Earth X, it's a completely different paradigm. And they come over here with summer camps and whatever else they were talking about. And they come over here and you have elementary schools and you have band camp and that sort of stuff. And, isn't this nice? I just have a little bit of issue with him being able to assemble that much knowledge in that little time. Now, again, I don't know how much time that they were on Earth 1. I assume it was really quick because Kara or Overgirl is dying, so they really need Kara's heart, and that was the whole reason for going over. So I think it was a little bit understated how much they learned. And
I figured that Thawne would have told them a whole bunch of stuff since he's from Earth Prime.
Yeah, that's part of it too, is he's got a lot of information. Because remember, he did a lot of research to change Barry's life to be what he wanted so he could get his power sooner and be able to return his Earth. And God knows from what time period of Thawne's life that we've seen this Thawne is from. I mean, he could be older than we realize because who knows? Time travel complexities are making my head hurt and I can't explain it properly.
that's fine, Michelle. I'll agree with you. I'm wrong. You're right.
I actually drew this character out and gave him a spot in the show notes because we love him so much. Why don't we just start gushing about Mick Rory and the joy that he is? SP, where do you want to start with Mick Rory?
Professor, your daughter insisted I not walk around your house naked, so I found one of your dresses.
Yes.
You're out of milk. That's where I want to start. Because that was when I was like, okay, it is on for Mick this event. It was great seeing him. He had the best lines. And basically nobody grabbed him for the big fight that happened in the shipping depot on the second part, which was the Arrow episode. He was just behind looking for Mustard. Nobody bothered to get him. Like, shouldn't you be out of there?
Well,
he's like, where?
To be fair, most of the people there, aside from Sarah, probably wouldn't think to go get the hardened criminal to come join them on one of these things. Now, Sarah probably should be like, hey, let's get Mick. But if you're Barry, you're probably not like, I need Heatwave.
See, he's just having a ton of fun, and you could really tell that he had a connection with Martin Stein because he's going to be all right. And then afterwards, he was a little choked up about the whole thing. And he was choked up enough that Leo had to come see him. And he might have been choked up a little bit about that too. Like, I'm seeing Snart again, and I really shouldn't, especially with all those head things that happened to him last season.
Well, he's beating his head when Snart walks in to make sure it's not an illusion too. And Mind Morph in the chat room said he got one of the other great lines. Well, I've tried to kill the groom twice.
He had a lot of great lines that I wrote down. I mean, you people have breeches, but no mustard. And he just walks in. Everything he says is like this yelling exclamation, but he does it in such a deep tone. It's like menacing all at the same time. And I think half the time he's just doing it because he's having fun.
I think so too. And plus he does get some of the best lines. Like, I'm looking through our notes we have here and I'm like, oh yeah, these are great. But still my favorite is, I knew I could count on you, pretty. Did you bring beers? Because everything's about the beers with Mick.
It is. And then, his moment when he tried to get Killer Frost to come out, boo! And they're all just turn around and look at him like, come on, we're trying to do some serious work here. He just wants Killer Frost to come out and play.
Yeah, while he's just sitting in the room drinking beer, watching them while the big brains are at work, and he's just like, oh, Mick, never change. Never change.
I loved how he fell asleep during the wedding ceremony. And then the fight happened, and he sees Killer Frost start. She's doing her thing, and he's like, oh, that's what I'm talking about. And he gets his gun going, and he's like, best wedding ever.
And of course, he does get the great line at the end as Sarah and Alex are saying goodbye. She and Sarah walks off with Mick. He's like, did you hit that? Good old Mick. He gets the best lines.
He does.
I'm dead on Planet Nazi.
I'm going to throw up. He actually puts the beer down at that point in time. I died saving cops, or he calls them pigs.
Pigs, he calls them, yeah.
Yeah. And he calls Sarah boss, but I think he's done that before. He defers to her quite a bit because he knows that she could probably take him in a fight, and he respects her and he respects everything that she's done.
Yeah.
And don't forget, by the way, that Martin Stein was the original replacement captain for Rip Hunter last year, and Sarah basically took over. So Martin had a leadership role with the team at one point.
Yeah, he did. It was self-appointed captaincy, but nevertheless, he was the captain for a short term.
No, it wasn't self-appointed. They actually all agreed that he was the oldest. He should take charge.
Okay, perhaps I'm remembering poorly.
Well, there was a little bit of self-granulation going on, but
Which was
everybody
entertaining to watch, by the way. It made for good TV.
Yes.
Yeah, Mick was when Dominic Purcell actually leaves the series or is no longer in the CW universe for whatever reason, like Legends of Tomorrow gets canceled or something like that. It'll be a sad day because he does that role so well. I know the actor is capable of so much more, 24 and all the others, or Prison Break and all the other stuff that he's been on. But this role, I hope he's having fun with this role because it looks like it's fun for him.
Yes. So I knew he was going to be one of our favorite moments. And that's why I took him out, and just because I think we could just all agree he's just one of our favorites and
Mick's the
such.
best.
Yes. So why don't we go to other favorites? SP, what's a favorite moment, fight, or just aspect of the crossover for you?
I got a couple of them I want to talk about. First of all, the best fight for me was in part 2, where they're having the simultaneous Danville shipping depot fight and the Star Labs fight when the Dark Archer comes in. I thought that was very well done. It was choreographed by Bam Bam, and you could obviously see with the cinematography going back and forth. It is the great fights that we've witnessed in Arrow with the camera panning back and forth. I watched the part 4 fight again. There's a little bit of that, but there's not nearly enough that they did in the part 2 fight. So as far as just a straight out fight and cinematography goes, the part 2 fight in the shipping depot and Star Labs were by far the better fights of the entire series. So kudos to the Arrow team for proving you all are best fight scenes. And a little Easter egg, by the way, did you guys notice in the part 4 fight, the big epic final fight, that the Arrow van, the same Arrow van that mowed down Ravager was the van that got into a collision in the middle of the film with the police car. Did you guys notice that?
I missed that now.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it was the same van, and it was the front again. So I don't know what kind of front end collision damage that thing really has on it or not, but it's got to be about the third or fourth time hitting superheroes and hitting other cars. And then also, we haven't talked about it, a little Easter egg. There's a caterer that came up in the wedding, played by Jessica Parker Kennedy. You guys remember that? She actually came up to Flash and said, "It's so great to be here," and remember to say, "I do." You guys remember that way back in part 1?
I do.
Yep.
Yeah, I suspect through other people, because I am not a comic book expert, that this is potentially one of Iris's and Barry's kids that have come back for whatever reason and seen the wedding. Maybe it was another bad guy that decided to come in at that point in time that she took care of. I don't know. Maybe she just wanted to see mom and dad get married because it was such an epic event. I don't know.
It could also be one of Wally's kids, because in the comics he does have twin children. He has a boy and a girl, so that's possible too.
Yeah.
Chris, your favorites?
My favorite, the first fight during the wedding. I really liked that because it was a cool team up fight with everyone calling stuff out and using their powers cooperatively. Like, one of my favorite moments in that is the fact that Ollie asks for Cisco to open him a breach, and he goes through the breach and fires an arrow as he's coming out. And you've got team up moments where you've got Killer Frost working with Heatwave to take out people. You've got Sarah working with oh crap, I forgot the sister's name all of a sudden. Chyler Lee's character.
Alex,
there you go. I get too excited. There's so many team ups going up on screen, and it works, and it was enjoyable. You've got Barry and Wally going together and working to get civilians out. I sat there and went, for an epic battle, this was a great TV moment. This is kind of how you do one of these team up fights, and I almost think they pulled that off better than some of the group fights in the Justice League movie. And when you consider the budget difference between the two of them, that's some high praise. Now, I'm not trying to dog on Justice League. I'm just saying it felt better to me. Maybe that's because they've spent so much time building it up. You care about the characters in there. It was an awesome moment for me. I really enjoyed that.
The one thing that I did not like about that fight, and I agree with you, it was an epic fight. I just want to point it out. Firestorm was very poorly used. So it came in, had a big, huge blast to begin with, and knocked the initial wave of Nazis down. And you see Firestorm one more time, but for the rest of the time, you're like, where's Firestorm? He should be in the middle of this, and he's not. So it's just a little bit of lack of continuity in the choreography.
I think that that's another thing that's sacrificed at the altar of budget, in all honesty, because I don't see the Firestorm special effects being cheap. I mean, let's look at watching him throughout Legends Tomorrow. They've used him very sparingly, it seems like. Maybe that's also because he's overpowered in comparison to the rest of the Legends, too.
Well, in comparison to Legends, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Kara's more powerful than him, but that's about it that we had in this crossover.
True. My favorite aspect is the girl power. You had Caitlyn being smart, and then when she was Killer Frost, she's kicking Nazi butt, and she's very important in the fight against the Nazi Rave Rider. She got to do her ice, do her little ice bridge thing.
Yeah, like
and
Iceman.
She's
cool.
Yeah, and she's got Vixen and Zari. They burst in. You've got again the Iris Felicity team up. Supergirl, kicks butt. Alex and Sarah, like we've talked about, they were not on the sideline. So it was just great to see all these awesome women do their thing throughout the entire crossover. Now that we got our favorite parts out, SP, what didn't you like?
I'll run through these really quick because we could spend forever on each one of them. But the first thing, each episode, even though this was a gigantic miniseries between the four of them and it wasn't done via the actual episode for the series, each episode did have a different feel of it based on the production team for that series. So that was very noticeable for me. And it could detract from somebody that's actually trying to watch this as a true miniseries. It's not at the level of From Earth to the Moon. It's not Band of Brothers. It's not that good. It is good. It is better than all the other episodes combined with all these four shows, but it is not that next level of miniseries. And then the lack of the B team characters, even in their own shows, like if they were going to have screen time in one show, they really weren't there. So I know you're trying to spread out the talent, but they didn't have enough for even one show combined with all four of them. I mean, you're talking people like the Martian Manhunter. You're talking like Diggle, who you only see at the beginning and the end. So, yeah. And then
Diggle makes sense, though, because remember, he's injured, and if he gets hit the wrong way, he's potentially going to get paralyzed.
Okay. Yeah, true. Yes, I get that, but you only see him on the bookends. I have a question. Maybe this is more of a not what I didn't like, but a question. Where did General Lance go? I mean, all of a sudden he was there and then he was not there. I didn't see what happened to him, and I watched through twice, but maybe I just didn't catch that in the in the portal room.
He got his butt kicked.
Is he dead?
Either knocked out or dead.
He could be the remaining leadership of the Nazis on Earth X now, because if you think about it, Oliver's not coming back, Kara's not coming back, so he could be the military leader that keeps Earth X going, and we could see more on this in the future.
Okay, so there's that. And then the final thing, Oliver and Nyssa, they are still married. Now, I don't know if this was ever put in any official books or not, but they are still married. So I think
the League. They were married by Roz. It's not like it was like official in any sort of way. It's just League marriage.
I think it was official enough to Nyssa and Oliver.
Maybe they got a divorce between seasons 5 and 6. I don't know.
I want to see that comic book series.
Yeah, like who got the, is there alimony? Is that why Oliver's broke? It's because he has to pay Nyssa support or something?
Yeah, see, that was the great thing. We had the Arrow 2.5 season comic book. We need the Arrow 4.5 or 5.5 comic book to explain how Nyssa and Oliver are no longer married.
Yeah, there you go.
Chris, what didn't you like?
So I got 2 points here. The first one, Wally really kind of got the short shaft on this one. I mean, he was in part 1, and then it's go babysit Joe and Cecile. And I was sitting there and I was going, there are some parts in this episode where it would be great to have 2 speedsters that could go and help with some of these things, especially that fight with Evil Wells at the end. And I feel that that was just kind of a sacrifice because they couldn't balance that many characters and that many speedsters in there because it would kind of shift the dynamic of this group episode. But it's a disturbing trend because I'm behind on Flash, but where I left off on Flash recently was Wally went away for a little bit, and there's like a small block of episodes with no Wally in them. So I kind of feel like they're losing an idea of what to do with that character, which leads me to petition them and say, bring Wally to Legends. You're going to need another superpower. You're going to need another superpowered character now that Firestorm's gone. Send Wally to the Wave Rider for a little bit. Let him go and cut his teeth on these time-traveling adventures with the rest of the Legends. Do I think it'll happen? Probably not, but it would be fun. They're just not using the character, and as someone who grew up reading Flash comics with Wally West in the lead, it just annoys me a little bit. And it's a minor quibble, I know.
So just to clear the air here, Chris, they literally brought him back at the end of the previous episode of The Flash just for the wedding.
Similar to how they put Oliver back in the suit in the previous episode just for this crossover.
Yep.
For me, I know this was, probably written in the summer when things weren't as serious as they are right now. For some reason, there are people who think being a Nazi is okay. They actually, it wasn't so much that it was, they got to punch Nazis, which was great, but they actually showed like the Heil stuff and everything. And for some reason, some of that, it's just like hit a little too close to home for what's going on right now. I don't want to, spend a lot of time with it. It's just, I know when they did this, they never thought that the climate that we have now was feasible, but it's just kind of, at least we saw some Nazis getting beat up, which was great.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of.
No, I get where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One last thing I had, because I touched on it earlier in the show and I forgot to mention it in my stuff, was Oliver's not doing great at this whole parenting thing right now. Now it makes sense, he's going on vacation basically to do this. He leaves his son with Reza, she's taking care of him, things like that. But what doesn't make sense is you're going to get married without your son, number one. Number two, you're not going to talk to your son about it beforehand that, hey, I want to get married to Felicity. Is that okay with you? And just do it on the spur of a moment. Oh yeah, and you've also jumped back into the Green Arrow suit and lied to him about it. I mean, this is a kid that just lost his mom less than a year ago. And now you're getting married to another woman. And you're bringing that woman into the life. And yes, she's been at the apartment, all of those things, and spending time with them. But big change. Big change. You should at least consult your son on it and talk to him about it so he knows what's going to come up. Am I off base here on this one?
No, the kids really don't have a veto, but you have to help them through the transition. And there was no transition here.
And I wasn't meaning
you're married.
I wasn't meaning he should give his son a veto power on it, but he should have at least talked to his son and been like, hey, here's where I'm at with this. Here's where I want it to go in the future. She means a lot to me. I'd like her to be part of our family, us to be a family together. And maybe it happened off scene. Maybe they've had conversations prior to the fact, but for him to just basically disappear on vacation for a week and be like, hey, I brought you a new mom when he comes back. I don't like that.
Weddings have parting gifts, and sometimes there are other weddings.
Yeah, I agree, Chris. That parenting fail. There was a lot of geek references and call outs. I'm actually going to start this. I have 3 favorites. Supergirl starts with beating up a Dominator, and she says, these guys are so last year. That is a reference to last year's crossover. The Ray, the actor playing the Ray is going to be the voice of the CW Seed animated show. So that was a nice way, we get introduced to him. And Supergirl to Overgirl in the part 4, she's outside. She says, General, would you care to step outside? This is a direct quote from Superman 2. I love it when they pull stuff from, the Christopher Reeve Superman stuff. I just absolutely, enjoyed that. SP, do you got any Easter egg favorites?
I do. I have a few. One is when Felicity said Oliver in the High Castle. That was a direct reference to The Man in the High Castle, the great Amazon Prime series, which I've seen the first series first season too, but not the second season. There was a bunch of Terminator references when Metella blew up, and then there was a few other, like Cisco had one in there too. There is no God. When the Dark Archer was coming in and he was facing Harry in Star Labs, he goes, "There is no God." And in my head, I went, "And there is only Zool." So Ghostbuster reference there. The ball bouncing in the cells, that was directly from The Great Escape, because you had the double tap of the ball and then it came back and then he threw it again. That is Steve McQueen in The Great Escape. That is directly from whenever he was sent into the hole to spend alone time. And of course, we touched upon it before. Iris and Felicity, Let's Go McClane. Obviously, a die-hard reference, a great Christmas movie.
Yes, that was wonderful. So, from my standpoint, Michelle, you touched on it. Anytime someone gets to channel Christopher Reeve, I love it. And the fact that Kara did that, when I was watching, I went, "Oh, she said the line. She said the line." And my girlfriend looked at me. She goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "That's straight from Superman 2. She just pulled a Chris Reeves. This is awesome." And then I only had one other one I wanted to bring up right now, and I had it in the quotes, but it was also kind of a nice tie-in moment, is when Kara's fighting Overgirl at the end, Wells is on the line, and he's like, "She's about to blow. You need to fly her up and away now." And I was like, that's also another classic Superman line. You go and read some of the classic comics and the Golden Age ones, and it's up and away, and Superman takes off into the sky, especially in the classic cartoons too. So that was a nice little connection for me.
Yes, there's a whole bunch, but those were our favorites. Any favorite quotes not mentioned yet? SP.
Yeah, I have a couple. First of all, Thawne, as he was getting into the Dark Archer. "Okay, we're all a little emotional. Here's what I suggest. I will stop vibrating my hand. You," speaking to Overgirl, "stop breaking my wrist. And you," speaking to the Dark Archer, "be 10% less brooding." I was like, oh yeah, that is definitely Oliver in any universe. He needs to be less brooding. Barry had a fun quote to Oliver in part 2. "I'm saving Nazi you for you." Okay. And then Felicity had a good quote in part 2 as well. "I thought we were going to die," said Iris. And Felicity came back with, "If I had a dime for every time I thought that I'd only have $2.40. I really thought I'd have more than that." So thus all the times before in all the 5 seasons that she thought she was going to die. And then a double pun from Cisco, which was great. I just love a good pop culture reference in a moment of crisis. That was awesome from our friend Cisco in part 4.
Yeah, that was pretty great.
Chris?
So I had 3 I pulled aside other than the one I mentioned earlier, and it's first one's a Kara quote. She goes, "His wife? Gross." No offense when she finds out that Earth X Ollie is married to Earth X Kara. Sarah gets another good one here. She goes, "The only thing we know about each other is what we look like with clothes off." Beautiful, by the way.
Awesome.
Awesome line. Awesome line. And then finally, because you got to have this interaction, some Mick and Leo interaction. "You're not my partner. You're a gangbanger." I think you mean doppelganger.
I think you mean doppelganger. Yeah, that's exactly what Leo meant, or Mick meant, but gangbanger. Okay.
For me, I have 2. Alex to Kara after the one night stand. "Why is it so bright here? Don't they have clouds on this earth?"
As she was wearing sunglasses. Yeah.
And to me, the funniest moment in all of it, you've got Barry and Kara going to where they're, the trio of evil.
Yeah.
They're stealing the prison. So you have, Barry and Kara arrive at the same moment, and then there's this pause, and then finally Oliver arrives on his motorcycle, and he gets off the motorcycle and he says, "Just a quick reminder, super speed. I don't have it."
Noted.
Yes.
I think
Noted.
Kara says back to him. That was awesome. It was great because they took their time to develop it. They come there and then they're just like almost looking at their watches sort of thing. And then you hear this motorcycle in the far distance and cars like screeching and everything getting out of his way as he's speeding to get there. It was a great thing that happened.
And then the over the top wheelie as he pulls up too.
Yeah. So to wrap this up, why don't we rate this however you want to? I know it's really fresh, so a score or just a general impression. SP, how would you rate this?
It's terrible. was the worst crossover I've ever seen. I expect more in my superhero shows. No, that's not it. I'm going to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10. I'm going to rate it as an 8. Why? Because I mentioned before, it wasn't like a band of brothers. It wasn't From the Earth to the Moon. It wasn't that epic miniseries. It was a good crossover, and it was really good episodes. So I'm not going to go to like 10, which would be best ever, 9, which would be From Earth to the Moon or Band of Brothers, but I'm going to give it an 8, which is a really good rating for something like this. They did a great job. And guys, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I don't think we're going to get another one of these next year. I think we're going to drop at least 1, if not 2 shows for next year. We've been talking about it for a while in Starling Tribune. I know we don't all see eye to eye on that, but this might be the last 4-show crossover that we get in the DC CW universe.
Chris?
So I enjoyed it also. If I had to rate it on a scale of 1 to 10, it'd be either an 8 or 8.5, similar to what SP had said there. It's the best crossover we've had so far. I think they took a lot of lessons they've seen from other things and said, okay, we're going to put together some fun here. And we've got a bunch of characters we're invested in because, I don't know about you guys, I watch all of these shows myself. We've seen a lot of these characters grow in some cases over the span of 6 seasons. And to get the payoff of all of them in one room, even if you can't keep them all on screen at one time because there's so many of them, it's just a fun moment. It's the same reason I like the Defenders when Marvel did that. It's the same reason I enjoyed the Avengers movies when they did those, because you got all of these individual characters you loved, put them in one thing where it all crossed over. And it's why I enjoyed Justice League, because you get this great payoff of here's these individual threads, these individual characters, let's team them up. And as someone who grew up reading comics, who loved these mega crossovers and things like that, things like the Secret War book that came out, Secret Wars book in the 80s, it's just a fun moment. And it was fun. It was enjoyable. It continued to grow some of these characters, and you got interactions you never thought you would see, because who really thought we'd have gotten these cool, funny moments between Sarah and Alex until the crossover happened, because they'd never met before. So it was a lot of fun. It served its purpose in that regard.
Yeah, I enjoyed this as well. It was awesome. I agree. A good solid 8, 8.5. Would have been nice to have had more Wally. But we did focus on a lot of the core characters. We had some good arcs. Unfortunately, Stein passed away. It gave it a big, huge emotional punch. It only, it brought in the characters that we kind of sort of like Nate and stuff, sparingly, and they came in for the nice big fight. Yeah, I enjoyed it. I liked this crossover better than last year's, because, again, they had more time with it, and they knew they had Supergirl, so they got to really craft this huge, wonderful 4-hour event.
I mean, it's basically a movie in and of itself.
It would be nice if they would release this as like a Blu-ray with like no commercials and everything, just so you can like sit and watch like the good, 3.5 hours?
3 hours. This is like 42. So the runtime on the CW app was about 42 minutes per show. So you're running just shy of 3 hours.
Yeah, so you can sit through that. That's less than a Lord of the Rings movie, so it's doable.
We
Even extended cut.
We did forget a great moment the chat room brought up, which was the T-sphere with the atom writing on it, shrunk in size.
Oh,
I was like, that was awesome. There's too many awesome moments. We can't remember them all.
And we don't have time for them all. So if we missed a special moment that we have not talked about, please get a hold of us at Starling Tribune. You can get a hold of me, Stargate Pioneer at GonnaGeek.com. And then we have a Facebook page, which Michelle monitors, Starling Tribune on Facebook.
Yes, so we're going to bring our epic discussion of this 4-hour event to a close. Next week, we're going to get back to our regular scheduled coverage of Arrow. Next week's episode of Arrow is called Irreconcilable Differences. It's season 6, episode 9. It will air Thursday, December 7th. And just FYI, this is the mid-season finale. Black Siren and Caden James kidnap Quentin to get their hands on a weapon of mass destruction. Mm-hmm. Directed by Laura Besley, writers Beth Schwartz and Sarah Tarkoff.
The weapon of mass destruction was Kara. She already blew up.
Yeah.
Overgirl. Yeah. I don't know what they're talking about.
Me neither. I guess we better tune in next week and find out. So, guys, as we wrap things up, each week we like to remind you guys that The Starling Tribune is in fact part of a network of shows that you can find over at gonnageek.com. We've got 20 plus different shows in the network. You've got shows like us, the Starling Tribune, who cover a specific thing, the television show Arrow. Then you've got other shows that cover like general geek culture, other television shows like Doctor Who. There's a variety of things regardless of what your tastes are. And each week we try to highlight one specific show, give you a taste of it and say, hey, maybe you guys should go check that out. And this week, we're going to talk about episode 43 of the newly returned Game Life Balance US podcast. So what happened this week on episode 43 entitled We're Back, Weddings, Extra Life, and SNES Classic Plans? Well, a newlywed verified Cody Goff returns to the Gonna Geek Network with his co-host Jonathan Martin after taking a 6-month podcast hiatus. Hear them talk weddings, classic Star Trek, the Extra Life video game marathon, Super Mario Odyssey, and their plans to focus on the SNES Classic now that their podcast is officially back in business. So Cody and Jonathan, welcome back to the podcast life. And guys, go check them out over at gonnageek.com and go check out some of the other great podcasts that are there as well. But looking at the time, it is time for us to start wrapping things up. So a big thank you to everyone that did participate in the live video streaming of this over on geeks.live. So we had a bunch of people in the chat room. Thanks for joining us this week, everyone, for this awesome crossover. And also thank you to everyone who does download the podcast at a later date or watches the replay of the Starling Tribune on the Gonna Geek YouTube channel.
Remember, you can always catch us live as we record at www.geeks.live at 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific on Sundays.
We would love to hear from you. We are the Starling Tribune on Facebook and Instagram, at Starling Tribune on Twitter, and you can call us at 612-888-CAVE. That's 612-888-2283. Well, this brings us to the end of another great episode. Any last sign off? At Stargate Pioneer.
Hashtag bloodless Nazis.
At the Chris Farrell.
Hashtag Super Arrow.
And I am at Michelle Ely, signing off with hashtag Sarah, the Sassy Assassin. Oracle, I think we're done here.
This was the Starling Tribune. You can leave us feedback at gonnageek.com or check out our archive at starlingtribune.com. Visit gonnageek.com for more podcasts. Music by Kevin MacLeod can be found at incompetech.com. This podcast is not produced or maintained by the CW, Warner Brothers Television, CTV, or DC Comics. All characters, stories, and situations are the property of Time Warner. No infringement is intended. We will see you for the next episode of CW's Arrow.